What is up, YouTube? Hope you guys are all doing well. I actually just finished the session. I forgot to film an intro. That's also why I look so greasy. It's so humid outside. Just finished it. You guys don't know the outcome yet, so I'm not gonna spoil it. But yeah, let's go play some 2-5 Saturday night, Seminole Casino, Coconut Creek. Let's go.
All right, guys, first hand of the night, ace 4 of spades under the gun. We make it 20. We see a player in middle position in the big blind come along with a call. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes down ace, king, queen, rainbow. It checks to me, and with our exact hand, I think a bet is probably best, although I don't think I can get 3 streets of value with my exact hand. So yeah, I think a check or a bet's probably okay. This time I decide to bet 20, and we only see the big blind come along with a call. The turn is the 9 of hearts, putting a backdoor flush draw out there. He checks it, and once again, as I mentioned previously, with our exact hand, I don't think I can get 3 streets of value, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think a bet on this card is actually best. If he has like queen X of hearts, king X of hearts, maybe 10 X of hearts, I don't think he's going to be folding. But regardless, I do check, and the river comes the jack of hearts, which is probably the worst card for our exact hand. The big blind now leads out for $65, and really can't think of too many hands he's just randomly turning into a bluff. So I pretty quickly fold. Alright, in this next hand, we see a player in the cutoff limp. I'm in the big blind with 10-8 of clubs. I decide to raise it up to 30, and he proceeds with a call. So heads up to a flop, which is pretty good. It comes out 10 high with a few diamonds. I think a bet here is probably best with our top pair. So I bet 30, and he comes along with a call. The turn is a pretty good card. It's another 10. So obviously I'm almost certain that we are very far ahead right now. If he has like an ace high hand or a small pair, I don't want him to fold quite yet. So I decide to bet $75, and he folds. We definitely have some momentum on our side. In this one, we have jacks in the big blind. There's a raise to 20. There's a call. I squeeze out of the big blind, and they both fold. But in this next one, there is a little bit more action. We have jack 10 of hearts in an early position. We open it up to 20, and a player who does not like to fold calls my $20 raise. The flop is pretty good. It comes down jack 9-3. So we have top pair here. And against this player, definitely just want to be putting in money with a top pair. I bet $20, and he calls. The turn is the 5 of diamonds, putting a backdoor flush draw out there. I check it, but in hindsight, I think a bet is probably best against this specific player. Once again, just does not like to fold. If he has a better jack, so be it. Yeah, so I check, and he does check it back. So almost certain that we do have the best hand. The river comes another 5, so a pretty good card. And like I mentioned, I mean, nothing too crazy. He just likes to call down. So I think a big bet here is probably best. I just don't think he's folding any pair, or maybe even ace high might throw in the call. So I decide to overbet the pot about 100, and he snap calls. I show my cards, and we're good. So maybe missed out a little bit of value there on the turn, but regardless, we'll take it. In this one, there is a button straddle. The small blind calls. I make it 50 in middle position with ace king, and they both call. So 3 ways to a flop, which is pretty much overkill. It comes out ace, king, deuce with 2 spades. We have top 2. It checks to me, and we can just get value from any worse ace, any flush draw. So I decide to bet 50, and we only see the player in the small blind call. So now we're going heads up to a turn, which is an offsuit 10. So now we do lose to queen jack, but with our exact hand, it is still super strong on this board. We can get value from worse aces, flush draws, maybe like 10x of spades, those kind of hands, pair plus straight draw, just a whole bunch of stuff. So he checks it, and I decide to bet 125, but I actually regret not sizing up a little bit. Instead of betting half pot, I think like 2/3 or like 70 to 80% is probably best, so we can have a comfortable jam on the river. But this is all hindsight, and in the moment I bet half pot $125. When he just calls, we can almost always eliminate queen jack and maybe the unlikely set of deuces, so we pretty much always still have the best hand here. The river is the 9 of hearts. Doesn't change much of anything. So I expect him to check it over to me a lot of the time, but no, he leads out for $150. So did not expect that. I thought he would be checking a lot of the time. But as we already talked about, I'm almost certain that we still have the best hand. And just a quick note, I think the population probably would just call this bet and would be scared of, like we talked about, Queen Jack or maybe even like a set of deuces. But just with the prior action, I don't think he ever has these hands. If he rivered or turned some sort of two pair, that's amazing for us. So yeah, I think we pretty much have a slam dunk jam here. But I regret not sizing up on the turn because now when we go all in, it is a pretty hefty size of around $700. But as played, I think that's the only thing that we should be doing here. So I go all in for 700 and he snap folds. So maybe he was bluffing. I don't know, but still a pretty good pot. All right, in this next one, we are in the +1 position with pocket queens, which, if you guys saw my last video, might be my favorite hand of the year. Regardless, there's a under the gun straddle. We make it 35. We see a player in middle position call, and then the straddler comes along. So 3 ways to a flop, which looks pretty good. It comes jack high with 2 clubs. Action checks to me, and the player to my left, it's that player who seems like he has a tendency to overcall. So definitely want to just put money in this pot. Nothing too crazy. I decided to bet $70. He calls, and then the under the gun player folds. So heads up to a turn, which is the 10 of spades. Yes, now we do lose to jack 10, but if he does have pretty much any other jack, like I think he could very well have hands like jack 7 suited, jack 8 suited, king jack, ace jack. You guys get the point. He only has around $350 behind, so I think an all-in is probably best. Maybe if we check, he might bluff on some of his flush draws, or maybe even value bet a jack himself, and then we could check raise all in. So yeah, I'm actually curious what's the best play, but this time I just decided to put him all in myself for around $350. He ends up tanking forever and eventually folds a flush draw. In this hand, there's a under the gun straddle. Once again, we're in the +1, just like last hand. We have king 9 of hearts. This time I raised it to 30. I think I misclicked because I normally make it 35. Just because players in these games, they tend to just call pretty light, and I don't want to go a million ways to a flop. But anyways, this time it's 30, and we see the 2 same players in the previous hand call in this one as well. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes 6 deuce deuce. It checks to me, and on the super dry board, I think I can get away with betting pretty small and then betting huge on the turn, just basically repping a bunch of overpairs. And also, this is something that's interesting. We can get value from ace high and like king high and queen high on this street, and then if we bet super big on the turn, we can get those ace high hands to fold. So we actually pick up a little bit of value this way. Anyways, I bet 30 and the player to my left calls. The turn is a pretty safe looking card. If I still had these overpairs, I'd imagine I would still be ahead. But in hindsight, now that I'm thinking about it, this player really doesn't like the fold, so I actually don't know if this is the best play. But anyways, we now decide to bet pretty big, around $150. Or actually, no, we bet $200. Wow. And he ends up folding. This is probably one of my favorite hands all night. The Button, who is a player who I've played with a bunch throughout the years, but haven't seen him in literally about a year. He opens out the action to 25. We have 6s in the big blind. I just call. I think if he raised smaller, I might re-raise, but for 25, pretty happy to just call. The flop looks pretty good for pocket 6s. It comes 8, 8, 9 with 2 hearts. I check, and he pretty quickly checks it back, so pretty sure we have the best hand here. The turn is the 4 of hearts, breaking in the front door flush. Not too worried about it, because I'd imagine he would bet all his flush draws, and with pocket 6s, pretty sure that we can just get value from a bunch of these ace high hands with a heart. You guys get the drill. I decide to bet 40, and he pretty quickly calls. The river now is another heart, but it is the best one. It is the 6 of hearts, so we fill up here on the river. And I know this player, and I know that if he floated turn with any heart, he's pretty much calling pretty much any sizing that I throw out. So I think just betting huge here is the best play pretty much all the time. Against some players, maybe I would bet smaller just to try to get value, but against him, just gonna bet big and pray that he has a heart. So I decide to bet $200, and he goes into the tank forever. He ends up telling me his hand, and he has king queen of diamonds. So he has absolutely no heart in his hand, and he just thinks I'm turning some random cards into a bluff, which, for the record, just so you guys know, like, this is the dynamics that we're playing with. Like, he's tanking for 3 minutes with king, queen of diamonds. And to his defense, I guess I would have some bluffs on this run out. But yeah, he ends up making the correct decision, and I show him my cards and tell him that he made a very good fold. In this one, we are in the small blind. There's a button straddle. We make it 35 with ace king of clubs, a premium, and we end up going 4 ways to a flop. The flop is pretty dang good for ace king of clubs. It comes queen high with 2 clubs. So I think if we were heads up, I would consider betting, but being 4 ways, pretty happy to check this with the nut flush draw, and we can kind of disguise the strength of our hand. So I check it, and action ends up checking all the way around. The turn is not a good card. It is a 7. So the board's now paired. We're no longer drawing to the nuts, although we still have a very good draw. Checks over to the player in late position, and he bets $75. So as played, I think we just have a very clear call here. I don't know, maybe sometimes our ace high is good. So yeah, I just call, and the other players fold. The river is unfortunately a brick, the 9 of hearts. I check, he immediately checks it back, and he's going to win with pocket jacks. In this one, we are in the cutoff with ace queen offsuit. There's a button straddle. It folds to me. I open up the action to 40, and the button ends up calling. So heads up to a flop out of position, which comes 7-7-6 with 2 spades. I decide to c-bet for 40, and the button calls. The turn now is the 9 of spades, so we pick up a queen high flush draw. I think continuing on this card probably isn't the best idea. I think he has a lot more 9s, and I just think this board at this point is probably going to be better for him. But I don't know, maybe ace queen high is good. This time I decide to check, and now the button bets only $50, so a pretty small bet relative to the size of the pot. And against this sizing, I don't think we should totally discredit the idea of check raising big. Like if he had a hand like 8-9, maybe like 9-10, it would put that hand in a pretty tough spot. But this time I just call, and the river now is the jack of hearts. So we're just sitting here with ace high. I check it, and now he bets around $125. At this point, it's very clear that he has a hand that he's betting for value. And can we raise him off of that hand? Maybe, but in the moment, I just wasn't willing to. So I fold, and thank God that we didn't, because he has 6-7 of hearts. So he ends up flopping a full house. This is one of the more interesting hands of the night. There's a under the gun straddle, and then the +1 player blind raises to 20. I'm in the big blind with ace 8 offsuit. The small blind calls the 20, and now I think with an ace here, we have a pretty easy raise. I make it 100. Folds back around to the small blind, and he is the only caller. So heads up to a flop in position, which comes pretty good for our exact hand. It comes 7-9-10. He checks it, and this time I decide to check it back. The turn is another amazing card. It comes the ace of diamonds. So now we're sitting here with top pair and an open-ended straight draw. Expecting to have this check to me a lot of the time, but no, he leads out for a huge sizing. He chooses $150. I look at his stack and he has around $300 behind, so maybe we could go all in and just target some flush draws, straight draws and flush draws, that kind of stuff, but I don't know, that seems pretty optimistic. And if he is bluffing, maybe he can continue to bluff on the river. So I just call the 150, and the river is another 10, pairing the top card on the flop. He now slows down and checks, and once again he has around $300 in a stack. So it's a question whether we want to jam for value or just check and take our showdown. If he has a better ace, he's obviously calling. If he has a worse ace, I think he's going to be calling, and we chop, and I don't think any worse hands are going to call a bet. So I don't know, I just decided to check it back, and we are going to be chopping this one against ace 3 of spades. All right, I think this is one of the bigger, if not the biggest pot of the night. There's a button straddle. I'm in the small blind with pocket kings. I don't know why I haven't showed my cards, but I promise I have pocket kings. I make it 35. The button now raises to 90. He hasn't raised his button straddle at any point throughout this entire session so far, and I've been playing for around 3 hours, so I'm pretty sure he has a hand that he likes a lot. Me, on the other hand, I have been probably the most aggressive player at this table. So I think if I put in another raise, whatever he has, I don't think he's going to be folding. He has around $500 in a stack. So I'm just going to try to put him all in now and just target those pocket 10s, pocket jacks, pocket queens kind of hands. Maybe he has an unlikely ace king. So I go all in, and luckily we don't get snap called, so we know that he doesn't have aces. He eventually calls. So we're going off to a run out with no further action. The flop is the dreaded ace high. The turn is a brick and the river is a queen, so we're beating pretty much nothing at this point. But one of the hands that we are going to beat is pocket jacks. So luckily for us, we put the money in pre-flop and we get all the money in before that scary ace came out. Let's go. Last hand of the night, we open up 9-10 of diamonds under the gun 220, and we only see one player in later position call. So heads up to a flop, which comes down 10 high. Looking pretty good for our 9-10. I continue for $20 and he calls. The turn now is an 8, so we're still sitting here with top pair. I think with our exact hand, I'm pretty happy to pot control. I don't think we're going to get 3 streets of value with 9-10, so I check it, and now he bets $35. Well, I don't think he's ever bluffing for this sizing, but at the same time, we do have top pair, so I don't think we can fold quite yet. I call, and now the river is the ace of hearts, a chord that should generally be better for me. I actually think about maybe bluffing on this card and trying to get a better 10 to fold, but the reality is that is just a good example of fancy play syndrome and is pretty just unnecessary, I feel like. So I don't know, I'm just going to take my 10-2 showdown. I check it, and he immediately checks back Jack 10 of hearts. So we're going to be losing this one.
All right, guys, just finished up the session, and look how greasy and humid I look out here. Disgusting. Anyways, that is my loaner vehicle, the Audi A5. It's pretty nice, but one thing that I don't like about the new cars, well, this one at least, is that it has this feature where if you try to switch lanes and you don't have your turn signal on, it gives you like hesitation, like it keeps you in the lane, which I find quite annoying because oftentimes I don't use my turn signal. Sorry, but it's just reality. Other than that though, pretty nice car. About the session, we were in the game for 1100, ended up cashing out for 1830. So pretty good outcome. We ended up winning 730 in like 3 hours. Not too many tough spots. We really just had big hands, which I feel like is a reoccurring theme this year. A lot of big hands, we bet, we ended up winning, and yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, if you enjoyed it, and enough for me, guys. I'll see y'all in the next one.